Welcome once again to our Amba history. And today on our Amba history, I told you we're going to receive our elderly statesman who is here to tell us the difference. As so many people asked last week, in fact, they were so excited to know the situation right from someone who had experienced the very life that we are trying to dig out now. And we see that a number of people came up asking a number of questions. And I promised that Pa was going to be here today to just tell us the difference that he experienced and what was the working conditions in the British Southern Cameroons and when he went to La République. And so today will be a direct history from him to just build up the Ambazonians' minds to know that the crookedness which is found in La Republic today and which some Ambazonians are very much involved was not the system in West Cameroon. Well, he is here and he will talk to us as I encourage all of you to invite the people and those who are willing to know. And those who have questions, please, Pa is ready to answer your questions. But if you cannot come up with your questions today, Pa is going to come back on the air. Yeah, because he has promised to educate the young Ambazonian people. All right, Pa, welcome to the program, our Amba History. Today, the 1st of November, another month in the history of Ambazonians. Go ahead and talk to the people who are actually listening to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pastor Ivo. As I said last time, if we don't know where we're coming from, we cannot review the current situation. Less so, we cannot plan effectively for the future. So it's very important that we know where we're coming from. The last time I tried to throw light on how Southern Cameroon politicians working with Nigerians at the time were able to pull themselves out of a country they didn't consider theirs and set up a government in Buea. And that government, within a very short time, was extremely effective because it harnessed its local resources, not loans or not credits from anywhere. It harnessed its local resources and started building infrastructure and institutions that by the time Southern Cameroon gained independence in 1961, the whole system was in place. And many people may not know, those who have been to Bamenda may not know, that the Bamenda General Hospital was funded entirely by the Ndele government soon after the Southern Cameroon government was set up. But when the colonial masters saw that it was such an edifice, they brought the governor general from Lagos to open it. And if you go there, you will see that it is some governor general from Lagos who opened it, but it should have been opened by the Prime Minister of Southern Cameroon, Dr. E.M. Ndele. These are some of the things that you pay for being a colonial country. Your own achievements will be attributed to your colonizers. But last week I pointed out how this government very quickly settled down. They used the resources from this CDC to build up CDC clinics, CDC hospitals, and linked those up with government schools and private missionary schools in the areas where they functioned. The whole thing worked in such a productive way that the Southern Cameroon government did not rush to double institutions, as is the case now. Wherever there was a CDC hospital, the Southern Cameroon government did not open another hospital there. All it did was to provide enough subvention in case CDC was running out of resources to make sure that the communities around there benefit. The same thing with the mission schools. In fact, the government even sent its own government school teacher trainees to the missionary established teacher training colleges. CDC did the same thing. CDC did not have neither nursing schools or midwifery schools. They sent their students to Shisong, where the Catholics had a nursing and midwifery school. This type of collaborative work went on very well, and the government finally set up what we called a granting aids program. That is, it sets the standard for every school, standards in terms of the area that a senior primary school should have, the quality of teachers that it should have, and then says, okay, if you had to do that, Baptists, how much would that cost you? Catholics, how much would that cost? Presbyterians, how much would that cost you? And the government came in to provide that extra allocation of resources in the form of what they call granting aid. What did that do? It made sure that every child, whether you were in an urban area or in a rural village, received quality education because your teachers were being supported, the inputs were being supported through government's granting aid. In fact, what some people don't know, and this is rather unfortunate for our history, is that the Southern Cameroon government in 1960 had a 10-year educational development plan prepared under a gentleman by name Damukong, who was the Secretary of State for Education. And when I was a student in England, I was in the library because my school library was also the national library for science, political science, and history. And I was sitting in there, was studying, and I got tired, and I decided just to look around the African section. And I saw this document, Southern Cameroon Government 10-year education program. I took it out, I sat down, I read it, and forgot that it was time for the library to close. The librarian had to come and touch me on the shoulder and said, "Look, it's 10:30. I need to close." I regret that I never took it away. I should have just carried it away. But when I returned to Cameroon in 1972, it was evident that the goals of that program had been achieved in terms of teacher training, in terms of nursing training. And the first visit to West Cameroon by the Minister of Health and Education was to come back and tell us in Yaoundé in 1973 that there were too many teachers, too many nurses, too many midwives in each school. I still remember very well a director on the Ministry of Health. When they came back, he asked me, he said, look, vous croyez où? I said, where do you people think you are? In Switzerland? And I said, why do you ask that question? He said, I went to Womb Hospital and I slept in the medical doctor's house. The windows were like Swiss windows. They were you lie in doctor's bedroom and you can see the lake and you can see the mountains, and it's so cold. Yet you people have large windows. And I was stunned because this guy had trained in Canada, so he should have known building standards. But why was it possible for whom to have the same director of hospital accommodation standards as Bamenda Hospital or Kumba Hospital? Was because of PWD. PWD's job was to standardize all services in southern Cameroons and later West Cameroon. So you see, we operated in West Cameroon on the standards and on norms and on values that were meant to ensure that every Southern Cameroonian received the same quality of services, the same quality of care, the same quality of administration. And that can only be possible under a common law system. You will not have it in a civil law system which seeks to raise some citizens to what they call évolués, those who now qualify to be Frenchmen. And this was the big difference that I sensed when I came back to Cameroon, that they had destroyed our system. Not only had they destroyed our system, they transferred most of our nurses and midwives and teachers to East Cameroon, where they didn't have teachers. And I know a little bit about the East Cameroon history because I read it. They had a system that did not really have teacher training colleges. The French, after their revolution, had planned after the First World War to show the colonies that had gone to them that they were the best. So they selected people who were going to be trained as teachers and put in classrooms that were not even built nor equipped. But the war broke out again. So those French teachers who were supposed to come to La République de Cameroon never came. And they had set up no system for training teachers. So all those teachers by independence were being called monitors. Those monitors were Africans who were supposed to be assistant to the Frenchmen who never came. And so we took up 1961 with a state that was fully organized. It had a health policy, an education policy, an industrial policy, a water supply policy, an agricultural policy. It had trained veterinarians all over. And one advantage it had was that it sent its children around the world. There were West Cameroonians who were educated in Australia, in Finland, in Scotland, in England, in the US, in Germany. And so when these guys came back, it was really a mixture of experiences that they were pulling together. And the only reason why they could do that was because we had the Civil Service Commission I talked about the last time, whose responsibility was to evaluate the academic and professional competencies of every Southern Cameroonian who came from abroad, whether from any of these countries or from Nigeria or from Ghana, wherever it is. And so we had a fully functional government. The other thing that the functional government did, for example, was they sent someone to Israel to study the Israeli state lottery. And when he came back, the Southern Cameroon set up a lottery system that became a real instrument for domestic resource mobilization. And those resources went to building health clinics in rural areas, water supplies in villages, even schools, even accommodation for health center nurses, midwives, and so on. And in 1961, when they brought this nonsense of unification, the Francophones discovered the treasure of the state lottery. And first, they transferred the head of the state lottery to Yaoundé, and therefore the records and accounts were supposed to be kept there. And then the next thing they did, they abolished it and then brought in what we now have today operating in southern Cameroons, these private gambling houses, which take so much money out of Cameroon every day, virtually every week. And all that money goes to French people, French institutions, and French companies. So on the one hand, you had a government that was setting standards for its people and aiming high. On the other hand, you had a new colonial government that was listening to a kleptomaniac neo-colonial power that whose only ambition was to suck up as much of the natural resources of the countries as possible. And they immediately had this mission of assimilating southern Cameroons. And how did the assimilation program start? They started with ENAM, they started with the Col Normal, which any Southern Cameroonian who went there came back with a salary much higher than his counterparts in West Cameroon, and therefore that attracted some of our people to think, yeah, this is the great thing to do. And we may have forgotten what our mission was because they sucked up our institutions. And that's why my explanation last week was to tell you how the process
Yes.
worked.
Yes.
The assimilation program was not a program by La République de Cameroon. No, it was a French government program. And they monitored it. Joe had to be removed because they realized that he was moving faster with our development program than Yaoundé was moving to try to rip off of Southern Cameroon government resources, and given that he was a very determined and aggressive and articulate leader, there was no way to put him down but just to eliminate him, and therefore that voice is silenced. And that's what happened.
Okay. All right, Pa. Thank you very much. Um, After this musical break, we would like you to tell us a little bit of some of the things that curbed corruption, and not only that, made the people to be effective in their duties and their job descriptions,
Okay,
especially the letter of employment with a job description to the individual. I would like to hear that after this musical pause.
thank you.
Thank you.
Follow you everywhere you go. Come, let us rejoice and declare, Hallelujah.
Thank you very much, Annie and Josephine. We are remembering where Southern Cameroon started, where they went, where the corruption came in, and where their eyes were open to evil, and that has brought us to where we are today. And we are struggling to get back to where we were before these evil people came to corrupt us, and we are getting there. Now, Pa, tell us something, the letter of employment, job description, and the microphone is yours.
I think one has to go back to the Southern Cameroon Constitution because
Right.
it defines everything, levels of responsibilities, levels of accountability. But the most important thing for any Southern Cameroonian that was looking for a government job and had qualifications was the Public Service Commission. You did not write an application to a minister or a secretary of state or a director. No, you submitted your application and your qualifications to the Public Service Commission. Even if you made a mistake and wrote to a minister or director, he will tell you to go to the Public Service Commission. And the Public Service Commission met even for summer holiday jobs for students. It was still the Public Service Commission that screened which students could be employed over the long holidays in government departments, whether in research offices in Ekona or in Bambly Agric Institute. Those had to be screened by the Public Service Commission. And once your application has been screened in Public Service Commission, there was a letter of appointment which was sent to the department head where the Public Service Commission thought you could best use your talents. And you were given an appointment letter there acknowledging that you have been employed. And your salary still came from the Treasury because the message from the Public Service Commission was copied to the Treasury. You may be a third class clerk or an apprentice or whatever the case may be. That letter was sent out together defining what your functions will be, because the Southern Cameroon government did not just do as La République does, affecter, nommer. No, it defined your functions. And these were contained in your appointment letter. Now, wherever you worked, if you were a qualified technician or a doctor or a teacher or a nurse, whatever profession that may be, you would normally receive at the end of a certain stage of your employment very early what they call a government gazette. And the government gazette will define whether you are an established civil servant, in which case from now on you're fully integrated in the civil service, or you are an apprentice, and the period of apprenticeship will be defined. And at the end of that apprenticeship, you will get another government gazette. The government gazette was printed, not this thing that you see from La République de Cameroon, note de service, which is just a flimsy piece of paper. No, government gazette was printed and it will be circulated in all personnel offices in southern Cameroon. So if you were, let's say, a carpenter working for PWD, and you were posted from Kumba to Victoria or let's say to Tico, the chief clerk in that office has the gazette that said you were now an artisan grade 1 or grade 2. He will have your name in the government gazette. So there was a thick book in every government office that kept these records. If you were a medical doctor, all that, if you were posted from Cambe to Womb, the administrative officer in Womb has the gazette that published your name as a district medical officer. So if you are coming to take over from the current doctor, there should be proof that the Public Service Commission actually considered you qualified to be a district medical officer. And that's how, and therefore you were entitled to a certain quality of accommodation, an office that was equipped in a certain way, and all this work was done by PWD. You didn't have to be carrying beds from one district to the other. No. This was government furniture with government furniture. Um,
Okay.
your job description also provided the basis on which the person who is supervising you will prepare your annual reports that get to the Public Service Commission and then on to the treasurer. When they get to the Public Service Commission, the Public Service Commission recommends that yes, this guy is due a salary increase because his performance has been good, or he's due promotion because he's risen to the level of being promoted. And another gazette comes out and confirms. So you see a collective system of evaluating and placing personnel, which is very different from what La République does, even till today. If, as I said last week, if you lost your father, your supervisor did not just say, "Oh, he was my classmate. I'm sorry. Oh, okay, go and bury him. Do all the ceremonies, and when you are finished, come back." No, he will prepare a note of service saying Mr. X or Madam Y has lost the father, and according to the general orders, he or she begins uh, leave, special leave for burying their parents on such and such a day. Date of resumption is such and such a day. That's it. He doesn't just sit down, then you come back 2 weeks later and say, "Oh, it was so difficult to finish the burial, and then we had this family problem that we had to discuss, and then." That did not exist in Southern Cameroons. If it was
Okay.
your brother or sister, the general orders defined the length of time. And so the lack of job description in La République Cameroon is the reason why nobody does anything, because the only thing you get when you are appointed is that you are being appointed at category this, and your privileges will be such and such. Whether you are a minister, whether you are a director. And so you are actually told that you don't have to really perform. And that's
Good.
why the two systems are incompatible. There's no
Okay,
way
Pa.
that we can have a Southern Cameroons or Ambazonian civil service operating as part of the East Cameroon civil service. La République
All
civil
right.
service. It does, first of all, La République does not have a civil service. They have fonction publique. That means public functions. That is not a civil service.
Wow. Wow. That's another page. The difference
Yes,
between civil service and public function. In
yes.
fact, we shall talk on that elaborately, Pa. But I would
Okay.
like you
Yeah.
uh, to conclude today by talking to us with this inversion, because we now know that we went to La Republic thinking that they were as human, as honest as us, but we discovered that they had an agenda which we were not foolish about, but because of the simplicity of our hearts, we try to bring them closer to educate them. But they have actually proven to us that they are savages and wild animals that cannot be trained. Now, this move that the Southern Cameroonians, Ambazonians have taken to walk out of this kind of hostile government of La République du Cameroon, of which it reflects to the working out of the government of the eastern state of Nigeria by our fathers, and there was no reprisal with guns and machetes like La Republic is doing. So, what can you tell us about this treatment we are getting from La Republique, different from Nigeria? Is it a cultural system of France and Britain? Just go ahead and tell us why we are receiving such a treatment and the reason we must get out of it. Over to you.
The relationship with Nigeria was from the beginning a temporary one, because Southern Cameroon was not a British colony, and the British tried to save administrative money by administering the trusteeship territory they had taken over as part of Nigeria. So it didn't take Southern Cameroon long to begin to say, look, we really don't want to be going to Lagos to discuss problems that are taking place in Buea, in Kumba, in Mamfe, in Bamenda, in Du. So that message was swallowed very quickly by Namdi Azikiwe, who set up the NCNC, National Council for Nigeria and Cameroons. And through us, they had the Eastern Nigerian House of Assembly. But no sooner did we get there than our leaders realized that it was just a stepping stone for establishing their own region. And therefore, that our leaders were really not having full authority, even though they had given Dr. Ndele some ministerial posts. But that was, for him, it was irrelevant. It was not giving the decision-making process that we needed. And since the two states, Nigeria and Southern Cameroon, were speaking on the same terms, having been subject to the British administrative system, it was easy for dialogue and critical analysis of the problems and an acknowledgement of the errors of each other. And it didn't take them long to accept that Southern Cameroon will manage its affairs as a separate region of Nigeria, with its own prime minister, with its own government and seat of government in Buea. Now, when you reverse that and you look at La République de Cameroon, it was a conspiracy, not a dialogue as we had with Nigeria. It was a conspiracy because when the UN was obliged to grant independence to these countries, and especially after the resolution 1608, they started a two-track system, trying to discuss with the French how the French could take over southern Cameroons, and discussing with our leaders how they will access to independence. I say it was a two-track system because when you look at the debate moving up to the plebiscite, which was suddenly invented in 1960, the question was, why would you have a plebiscite when in 1959 the Southern Cameroonian people had just had a general election which the KNDP won? So and that was a transparent election supervised by the colonial master. So there was no question of whether or not the government was legitimate. There had been no issue about legitimacy. I say this because I bring back the idea that I hear some international donors saying that, oh, we don't know who to talk to. In 1960, when they knew exactly who to talk to, because Southern Cameroonians had voted a government legally and it was fully installed, and it came up with proposals for the plebiscite, they turned it around because they knew that if they took the proposal from the Southern Cameroon government, evidently the other thing that France was negotiating with Britain under the table will not work. And so they had to bring in a third item. This plebiscite was going to be either staying with Nigeria or being independent, because those are the two territories that Britain managed. So suddenly to bring in another trusteeship territory which was not managed by Britain and whose international boundaries had been very clearly defined, uh, I will recommend to you guys, to anybody who's listening now, to read the legal definition of the boundaries between French Cameroon and Southern Cameroons. They are so detailed that even a brook is defined, a hill is defined, a valley is defined, right from up north down to Fako. So, having established that international boundary, why would Britain be pushing at the UN for a plebiscite to determine the wishes of a people who had just democratically voted their representatives just the year before, 19 before the vote for their independence was taken? I think that this is something that every Ambazonian needs to really understand, because if you don't understand this cleavage, you will assume that leaders just negotiated integration or unification with Nigeria. With Cameroon. It wasn't so.
Okay, Pat. Finally, let me just find out from you. What would you say about most of these our elites? Some of them are PhD holders. Do you think that they are ignorant of this fact of what we are talking about, the boundaries between La Republique and us? Or do you think that it's a selfish method that they are carrying out? Or do you think that they have been hypnotized? Or what do you say about this before we call it quit for today?
It is very, on my part, it's so difficult for me to comprehend why a graduate or a postgraduate degree holder of my age would not understand these very minute aspects of our history.
of our history. Yeah.
And the only thing I can say is that they have turned a blind eye on it, or they think it is unimportant.
Wow.
And
Wow.
if they think it's unimportant, I find it extremely difficult. And there is proof that the British had, I don't know whether it's money that the French paid or whatever it is, since the French cannot release their own classified
Documents. Yes.
uh,
Information.
diplomatic correspondence, is difficult for us to know. But we know from other writings that even before the so-called Fumban Conference, the dialogue was not between the British government and the French government, but more between the British government and the French.
Wow. All right, Pa. Thank you very much. You did mention
Yes.
of the legal definition of boundaries between Southern Cameroon and East Cameroon. Where can one get this kind of document to read?
Eh, well, it is the UN has the records, but also I
Okay.
mentioned a work by Anyangwe last time.
Youngway, yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
yes, it is. He's done a great job for Ambazonia, and
hmm
it is left for us to take it and run with it.
Okay.
Uh, I think it is contained in those records, but
Yeah.
if you went to the UN library in New York, or you went even to the US Library of Congress, a lot of this stuff exists there.
Okay.
And to show that the rest of the world expected Southern Cameroons to be independent is to see what Kennedy started with the Southern Cameroon government. I told you people
hmm
last time about the caste Bambly
Yeah.
and about PWD and the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
All that is stuff which the Fonja discussed with President Kennedy once he was voted into power.
hmm Yeah.
And he laid up this stuff, sent Dr. Foster to start the work on creating
Right.
the University of Science and Technology in Bambly.
hmm
And unfortunately, he was assassinated in November 22nd, I think 1963.
hmm
Just as that program was taking full force in Southern Cameroons in terms of the number of Peace Corps that were in all schools. And when the Southern Cameroon government negotiated its Peace Corps program, it was not for government colleges, it was for
hmm
every college, secondary school, technical training, teacher training colleges, negotiated that for them. And the Peace Corps went to those institutions.
hmm
The PWD, they got supplies of major road construction equipment and road maintenance equipment. But Kennedy was assassinated, and President Johnson, who took over, was a politician from the southern part of the United States who was not very excited with um, what was going on in southern Cameroons. And therefore, the program did not get
Right.
the support that it had. And then Doug Hammarskjöld was killed because
hmm
he is the one who was opposing the idea of uh, linking southern Cameroons to La République.
To La Republic. Yeah. hmm
Yes, he was assassinated. I use the word assassinated because that's what it was.
Yeah. That's what it was.
Yeah. So those are two key things that led to the situation in which we found ourselves. And the British were very conscious of it because after Fumban, they kept pressuring the Foncha government to sign something with Ahijo. And the Foncha government said, we have finalized nothing, so we can't sign anything.
Wow.
And
Well,
they basically concluded that we'll just bulldoze the same thing with the French and get ahead. And that's where we are today.
thank you very much once again, Pa. Your first statement to the Amazonian people is that if you don't know where you are coming from, you may not know exactly where you are going, and the future may be very bleak. And so, these pieces of history that is told to Amazonians to know where they are coming from, so that they should understand that the cause for which they are standing up to defend homeland is not an ideology of an individual. It is the DNA of an average Amazonian. And unfortunately, those of them who went to school, whom we thought that they could stand to defend Amazonia, like Foncha refused to sign any document with La République du Cameroon. Unfortunately, these very intellectuals of Amazonia who have studied and learned more than Foncha are busy doing some things that are uncalled for, accepting second class, even third class positions, of which it is very clear, and they very much know that we were never a part of La République du Cameroon in their independence and everything that was going on. And then some of you whom God has kept alive to reiterate this story, we are just praying that many of the Amazonians who are going the wrong way should wake up after seeing the suffering and the torture that an average Amazonian has gone through in the hands of La République du Cameroon. Now, if many of them who do not know and don't listen to this kind of history, they will feel that, well, man is to come here, die, and go. But no, there is something and there is a purpose for which God allowed that Nigeria did not swallow us, and of course, has not allowed La Republic to swallow us. Eventually, we are going to come out. And so we are encouraging all of you who are at home front to cooperate with the ARFs who are standing tall to make sure that their ancestors and their fathers' graves are protected. They should not be given over to infidels who have nothing to do but to extract our resources and desecrate our holy places, and so on, like what La Republic is doing. Now, their oppressive language does not only end in oppressing us, they also go ahead to torture us. And so we see that an average Amazonian grew up with a sense of humanity and the sense of community and the sense of other human beings being human beings. And each one had its position defined and was towing his lane. And that's why we were emerging and emerging and emerging. And Britain and France, like as Pa has said, we don't know what they were cooking. And today, if they are trying to make any stupid excuse, it doesn't work because in those days they had a government. Why did they not talk with the government? So all their excuses today are masterminded by whom we now know is the enemy of the Amazonian people, and that is the devil. But we must fight him spiritually and fight him physically, and that is what we are doing. Once again, Pa, thank you very much for your time. We are looking forward to having you back on stage with us to let us know so that it can spur us up to really mean business with what you are doing. Ambazonians, go back to your LGA, go back to your county, let's put up the fight, and let's drive these people out of our land. They cannot win with the battle of the gun. They cannot win with crooked diplomacy and fake notes and pronouncements out there. They cannot. So, Pa, thank you again. Ambazonians are very, very grateful having you, and we want you to just greet the Ambazonian people, and we'll call it quit for today. Over to you.
Thank you very much. There is one point I need to drive home before we go. Um, I said nothing happens to Ambazonians in La Republique by accident.
Right.
It's all planned at an individual level, at the community level, at the state level. At the individual level, La Republique discovered a tactic for ruining our people that when a West Cameroonian was getting to the stage of retirement, if there is a possibility of terminating him, you do that. That means he does not accrue the full pension that he is entitled to. The same thing as if you're forced to appoint an Anglophone as minister or director, then the powers will accrue not to him, but to the guy who is his deputy. He will have direct communications with the superior who is supposed to manage that. And that's why all these people will have from descendants of Amazonia who are there defining themselves as ministers, directors, and all whatnot. They don't have the power of that office because it is a centralized system and there is no devolution of power, there's no decentralization of decision making. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pa, for coming. We are looking forward. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambazonian people, be rest assured, Pa shall be coming back to reiterate and tell Ambazonians who are willing to go back home to their reality what they should do. And with
Any
that note,
questions at all?
come again.
Any questions?
Yeah, I think we are into another people's time.
Okay, so can you send the questions to me?
Yeah, if you, I will get the questions and send them to you.
Yes.
So please send your questions and send your contributions. I will send them over to Pa. And next when we meet, it shall please. We cannot take any call now because we. Uh, okay, just one moment. Let me hear what's going on. And then we,
All of
all right.
Oh, Jesus, you gave me a brand new love.
What's going on? All right. Thank you very much. We got permission. We have a few more minutes here. You who was calling, please, you can call back. Pa will answer your question directly. The other question that came in, Pa, which it says that uh, if what we are going through was all planned and is conscious, does it mean that the morals of the society has so degenerated to the point that there is no pity for humans who are being killed and sent to their early graves? Well, um, yeah, that's the question. If did you get it, Pa?
Yes, I heard.
Okay,
Um,
go ahead.
the the British have an expression. Um, it is teaching time saves nine. Um, we have to recognize that all our leaders, our elders, uh, have a blame. A number of us were fighting a one-man's fight during all this time by challenging people in their offices, but having no organizational force with which to operate. And it means that we sat in a house that was leaking and we did not do that stitch in time. Moral is not manufactured, morals are developed. Morals are defined by institutions in which people put priority on something. I give an example, and I've said this to the IG. Unless we are at a level where every Amazonian life is sacred, then we're not fighting for the revolution. Every Amazonian life has to be sacred, and we have to protect all people, whether they are young, old, defiant, ignorant. Those who take the mantle of leadership must consider as their primary duty the protection of the people of Amazonia. Uh, we will never have a state of Amazonia without paying a high price. No country has ever had independence without paying a high price. Whether it's America, Ireland, and just recently Ukraine, they are paying a high price fighting for their
Oh,
independence. So we have to
wow.
recognize that it's incumbent on every one of us uh, to pay the price that is demanded of us. This price sometimes may be in human lives that we lost because they have sacrificed themselves to resist the oppression. Eritrea faced the same problem. The Even the British, the English faced a similar problem when the Attila the Hun and his group overran them. If you go to Manchester, you will still see relics of the Danish domination of England. So we are not a sort of living an experience that no other nation in the world has lived. Bangladesh is paid high for the same nonsense that the British made to put them together with a nation 1,000 miles away from them. But that high price is settled down, and Bangladesh is a flourishing nation today. So, unless we see that, I have heard some of my peer tell me that, oh, these young people who are fighting, they didn't start this thing well. And I said, well, then where were you? And what have you offered to them as the proper advice? The only challenge for every one of us today is to get involved, get organized, so that the tricks of La Republique weeded out from midst, so that the goal for freedom is lit with a proper mantle, not by a bush lamp.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, Pa, who this Pa was calling, I've asked him to call again. He has not called. But I think we'll come to the end for today. And as we are getting ready, I'm sure many people will digest this after and call back to give uh, their questions and ask more questions, which in the next program that you are coming up, will be able to answer. And most of
Okay,
their questions are questions that we need to that you need to go into find out. There are questions that are at your fingertip, because they are, yeah, they know that you are able to do it. So thank you very much, Pa. And Ambazonians, we are remembering where we are coming from, and that's why we must fight. Pa has concluded by saying that there is no nation that has its independence and its freedom sitting around the table. There must be a fight and there must be a price. Ambazonia has paid, and we are getting ready to get into our land. So thank you very much. God bless the people of Ambazonia.
thank you, and thank everybody who